Welcome to Fran's Friends. As you can see, I have completed another one of my art dolls. What I do at the end of a project like this, I'd like to keep track of all the different techniques that I've used in these projects. So I developed what I call completed project template and on my computer. And what I've done is I've divided what I would like to accomplish with these projects. I put them in 2 categories. I name the project, I calculate what materials I used, which techniques that I used, alterations of the pattern, signature application, symbolism. What do these projects mean from a sentimental value? Cost analysis, mistakes, regrets, and some quotes. So each of the projects I'll go over after and fill in the completed project template. What I start with is I'll do photos, and I have a binder that I keep all these templates in. So these are some of the pictures that I've taken of this particular project, and as you can see, the detail in the fish, etc. And so I usually take a couple of pictures that I can put into the binder. So let's work through this particular project. So what I did call her, as I named her, Isn't She Lovely? And I'll explain the reason for that shortly. The materials that I used were reused scraps of cotton fabric, t-shirt fabric for the body, and also old t-shirts for the wings, and other parts of an old t-shirt for her scarf. So lots of t-shirt fabric, a little bit of felt in this. I did piping made from the collar and the bottom of an old t-shirt, and canvas for the beak, and also I painted it with acrylic paints. I used a metal ring for the scarf clasp, and I used buttons and beads, and I made homemade joints for my attachments for the wings, the legs, and the head. So those were the materials, the techniques that I used, and I try and use, if you go to my website, you'll see a lot of the tutorials I've done on technique, and I try to incorporate those techniques into most of the projects. So I did my fabric preparation using my fusible interfacing. I used the fleece fusible on the t-shirt material. And I also did some quilting fabric. The machine sewing and hand stitching, I do all my overcasting when I'm putting the pieces together with a blanket stitch, and the closure for finishing to after you've stuffed the animal is I use the ladder stitch for the closures. And again, really big on blanket stitching. I did the wings with blanket stitching. I did around the bag. All of the fish have been blanket stitched. And I also put a little bit of adornments with some shiny floss. The hat also has got the piping on it. And I used sculpting I did with canvas. So the beak itself is all from a canvas bag. I was a little concerned that I wouldn't get the mobility and the shaping, but I think it turned out really well. And then I painted it with the acrylic paints, and then I put a final finish, a gloss finish on the top. The pattern called for the use of epoxy sculpt for the beak and the feet, but unfortunately I haven't been able to get enough strength in my hands to mix the epoxy sculpt, so I did these other methods instead. For instance, with the feet, I did, I think you can see them on the bottom there, is I did them in felt. So just to accommodate and change. So the alterations that I did were using the canvas for the beaks, using the felt for the legs, and I added feathers to under the wings for that part of the alteration. It didn't call for these extra feathers. I altered with the hearts, and what I did do is I put a backing on the back to make it look like a sailor suit, and attach that, and then I put her onto a wooden block, which I haven't really done too much other than just paint it. And on the front, what I also did is I changed the pattern by incorporating t-shirt fabric to make it look like a shirt. So you should be able to see that a little bit there. So those were the alterations. Signature application. My hearts. And I love fish. I love doing the fish. So what I did was I put the hearts on the back, and I have my usual 3 hearts to symbolize my family, my husband, my son, and myself. So that's usually a standard signature for any of my projects. So symbolism, and this is where the name Isn't She Lovely comes in. I have a real love for the ocean and the sound of seagulls. It makes me feel thankful for where I live on the west coast of Canada. And as a little girl, my family had been posted to Germany. My dad was with the Canadian Armed Forces. And in those days, when you went abroad, the Army transported the families and soldiers by ship. And we were in Germany for 3 years, an incredible learning experience. And on our return to Canada, my mother happened to be marveling over the beauty of the seagulls on the ship deck, when one had the call to nature, and all down the front of her favorite lamb's wool coat. It was quite a spectacular result from the bird, and it's a moment that none of us will ever forget. And even today, if I'm out and about and there's a seagull overhead, I scurry away. So every time I worked on this particular project, I kept on thinking about my mom, and that, oh, weren't those birds just beautiful? So there it is. Isn't she lovely? So the cost analysis. What I like to do, and it's a big thing for me, is I don't want to go out and spend a lot of money on buying specific things for a project. So when I start one, I rummage around all my boxes of fabrics and bangles and baubles, and pull together what I can without having to go out purchase anything. And that's part of the fun of working on the project. So I really didn't purchase anything for this particular one. And it's you know, all craft supplies that I've had around the house, so it worked out really well that way. Then we move on to mistakes. Well, we all make mistakes, and as I've mentioned before, we do learn by our mistakes. So for some reason, the heat and bond on the legs, and I used felt on this one, but the heat and bond didn't seem to adhere. So I had to sort of redo the legs and the feet. And the other thing was when I went to put the joints on, I put the hole on the wrong side. So this is actually the back side and not the top. But that's okay, because it still looks quite nice. You know, and when you do run into a mistake or a problem, that's where the problem solving comes in. So that's kind of a neat thing to do, is to be able to problem solve these things. Like the beak, because I couldn't use the epoxy sculpt, it was a problem. So I came up with that idea, and I think it worked out really well. Also, I used a little bit of my pastels, and also the needle felting that I did around the eyes. But generally, I was quite pleased. So regrets, I do have one regret. I wish that I had used on the head on her hat, I wish that I'd used piping instead of that little band. But other than that, I don't think there's really anything that I would have done differently. So, and again, I always usually put my projects onto a base. And as you can see, I've got a heart-shaped base made out of the cotton fabric of the lighthouses. So the other thing I do is I'll make a quote. Sometimes, you know, like a stitch in 9 saves time, or a funny little picture. So what I did with this one is I just took a small picture of a Google image, a seagull eating some fries and a sandwich. And then down below, to remind me of my mom on the ship, and just the seagull on the top of with a bird in its mouth, or a fish in its mouth, I think it is. So there you are. So that's what I do, and I put it into a binder. Now, I thought this would be kind of an interesting thing for people to do that sell their art dolls, because once the doll is gone, you may have a few pictures, but that's it. So always take pictures and do a template as to what you did, how you did it, and what it meant working on that particular thing. So there you go. I'll go on to the next project, and it'll have to be a little bit less intensive labor-wise, and we'll see what happens. So again, thanks for watching.